Hello, I'm Pamela Davis. Welcome to episode 124 of the Well Done Life podcast. Hello, and welcome back to episode 124 of the Well Done Life podcast. I'm your host, Pamela Davis. If you are new here, hey, how are you? Welcome. I am so glad that you're here with us this week. If you've been here before, you guys know the deal. I love you deep, and I really am appreciative of your support on this journey. Before we get started with this week's episode, you guys know I really love to be very foundational. I love to make sure that we set the tone with the right tenets, the right foundation, and we are creating a safe space. So I like to make sure that our safe space is built on two very important things, and that is clarity and love. Clarity is pretty straightforward. I just want to make sure that you understand that the Well Done Life podcast is a podcast that I created for women. I created this space because I think that women are the foundation of society, and we need places where we can be vulnerable, where we can be our most authentic self so that we can learn and grow together. So welcome. Now, you have clarity. I have to give you my favorite thing. My favorite thing is love. I love love. And I want to make sure that while you are in this space that you feel loved. I want you to feel love from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. So the best way that I can show you that, I feel, is by sending you prayers. So this week, I want to send you prayers of peace. I know that it has been a crazy, fast, busy year. Like, we are in September, y'all. We're almost like, before we think about it, it'll be like Thanksgiving and Christmas, which is frightening. And that means that things are super fast again as coming out of the panini, and we're just being pulled in so many directions. So I want to make sure that I send you prayers of peace so that you can carve out time for yourself to just be, just to relax, just to breathe before it gets too overwhelming. Give yourself that space because you deserve it. I also want to send you prayers of empathy. There's a lot of different things that we're going through, lots of challenges, and other people that we love are going through those challenges too. Try to lead with empathy where you can. I know it's not always easy. I know sometimes we're triggered and it's just very hard to find common ground, but you'd be surprised what empathy can teach you about yourself as well as the other person that you are interacting with. So I'm sending you that. And then, of course, like I mentioned a few moments ago, love. I want to send you prayers of love. I want you to feel love from the top of your head to the bottom of your feet. And I want you to feel love in a reciprocal way. I don't want you always being the person giving out the love to other people. I want you to be surrounded by people who are pouring into you with love. And I want you to be open to being able to receive that love. So share your journey, share your troubles. If your circle is tight, your circle will be there to support you. Believe me, that's something that I struggle with, and I'm working on it. I want you to work on it too, because I know I'm not the only person sometimes who struggles in silence. I want you to be able to feel confident in your friends and in yourself, that if you share your struggles will never be used against you, and that there will be people who can support you and feed into you and lift you back up, because we all should be striving to make sure that each of us wins. And I'm also sending you prayers of prosperity. I want you to win. I want you to have as much abundance as possible, because I know that when you are abundant, not just financially, but spiritually, emotionally, the people who surround you get an opportunity to be blessed by you. So I wish you abundance in all areas of your life. So hopefully you feel a little of the love that I have for you inside of me now, and that you feel loved and secure. And you are here, and we are at episode 4 of our Fall Into Self series. Last week we did episode 3, actually Hold up, little quick rewind. We took a break. Last week's episode was Living Life Beyond 40 with the wonderful Sandra Bailey and Aura Riley from Life Beyond 40. And I hope you guys got a chance to check out that episode where we talked about it because y'all, I'm very passionate about 40. I am actually in now the last 6 months of my 40s before I transition into 50. And I'm very excited about it. So it is very something that I'm very passionate about. And I want to encourage women in our 40s and beyond for us to realize how wonderful it is to age and how we shouldn't be ashamed of it, how we should embrace it, and how there is still opportunity for us to do so many amazing things. So I hope you get a chance to check out the episode. I will have it linked in the show notes. And Aura and Sandra have an amazing platform to help encourage women along the journey. So I want to make sure that I share that information with you as well. But this week we are back into Fall Into Self, into our Fall Into Self series. We are on episode 4 this week. When we took a break before, we had given you guys part 3 or episode 3, which is family ties. And part 4, or episode 4, where we are today, is around generational trauma. And so we regrouped. We have some amazing queens back again and a few new faces to help kind of usher in this conversation around generational trauma. And generational trauma, I know, can be a heavy subject. But again, this is not about just laying out our traumas for the world. It's about laying out our traumas in truth so that you can start the process to heal. Because there are a lot of us who have been impacted by generational trauma. You know, our families were just doing their best to exist in a lot of instances and survive and raise families in times that we could not even deem to understand. And a lot of the things that they experience get passed down from generation to generation to generation. And so having this conversation is our way to kind of help create some commonality in that so that you can understand that you can heal and that you are not alone. Because I think a lot of people tend to sometimes feel like, you know, they're alone in your traumas, and you don't have to be alone, because you'd be very surprised. Many of us don't look like what we've been through. And so I am very excited about sharing this episode with you. I will have all of the information for the ladies who are appearing on this week's episode in the show notes. Please don't hesitate to share information with us, questions with us, because there will be part 2 to this conversation. Yeah, I just kind of feel like we didn't finish it off, and then we really have to kind of dive into grief a little bit more too, because we didn't really get a chance to talk about it. The conversation was just so good. So I definitely am very happy that you guys get a chance to check it out. And I just really appreciate you and thank you. And also I want to send a special shout out this week to my co-host, Miss Crystal Diaz. She could not join us this week. Crissy is sick, but I want her to know that she is definitely here with us in spirit, and that she will be back for part 2, because she will be on the mend and back again. And we cannot wait to have her back. But if you guys will stand by, then these wonderful, amazing women will be with you in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hello, my name is Christina Randawa. I am a stay-at-home wife. As of right now, I'm living my soft life era. I'm happy to be here and can't wait to dive into all of the generational trauma and grief.
Thank you. We're so glad that you're here with us this week. And then I'm looking right over at the lovely Tita Walker. Tita, will you introduce yourself to us, please?
Yes, my name is Tita Walker, and I'm quirky, free-spirited, and I love and enjoy coming up with uncanny strategies to level up people and businesses. That's who I am.
Yes, and she's very good at that. So I'm very grateful to have you back on my podcast again, and such a big part of the show. So thank you. And then, bam, she's back again, Yolanda Holliday. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself again for the people?
Hi, my name is Yolanda Holliday. I am always happy to be here, local to Charlotte, North Carolina, originally from Jersey City, New Jersey. And again, just happy to be here.
Well, we're very happy to have you as well. So thank you so much. And next time you're bringing wine for us.
We'll bring wine for y'all.
Yes, y'all be wine. And then, of course, another member of the fam who is celebrating an amazing milestone. She just completed her 100th episode of her podcast, Wander and Wellness and Wanderlust, Miss Valerie Moses. Valerie, why don't you introduce yourself to the people?
Well, I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me on the show. As Pamela mentioned, I am the host of Wellness and Wanderlust, focused on helping everyone just kind of live their happiest, healthiest lives without having to spend every hour in the day to make it happen. And by day, I'm a communications professional in Central Florida, and just so happy to be a part of this community and get to share my story and hear from these incredible ladies today.
Well, thank you. And we're, again, very glad to have you here. You're fam. I think you, Christina, Yolanda, y'all are like fam. That's how we're going to move forward as we go through the rest of this. You're family now. And Tita, so thank you for continuing to support and be here. So let's kind of dive in. We're talking about something heavy. We're talking about generational trauma. And before we kind of start to dive into it, my first question, because I think a lot of people have a lot of different perspectives of what generational trauma is. But I like to ask you guys, how do you define generational trauma? What do you think it is? Who wants to start?
Okay. I heard someone say this, so I can't take credit, but someone said they don't see it as trauma. They see it as a lack of resources. So it's a generational lack of, more so than trauma, because when you dig deeper, you find out that there's just so much more to it, and it causes what we call trauma, I guess.
That's an interesting perspective, because I never really kind of looked at it from that, because whenever I always hear it, I think of it from an emotional standpoint. So I like how you put the resource aspect on it. Does anybody else have a thought around it?
For me, I would say that it's more so, when I think of it, it's the unhealed hurt and ways that's been passed down from one generation to another generation that affects you, and you don't even realize that it's affecting you because it's unhealed throughout the generations.
I agree with that. Okay, so unhealed generational trauma, or unhealed emotion or lack of resources, and that's keeping that. Is that pretty much sum it up, or does anyone have any other perspectives on generational trauma?
Yeah, that's a good question, because I don't really think there is quite a definition. It's silent.
Yeah,
it's very silent, because it's inadvert behaviors and nuances and attitudes that you don't even, you're, especially if you're born into it, you don't even realize that that trauma is occurring, and that you are taking on those nuances and behaviors, and then you're silently passing it on. So I think it's a silent killer, essentially.
Yeah, I would agree with that too. And especially the part where you don't really even think that you are experiencing it, because a lot of us who have experienced it or are experiencing it, they don't think about like, wow, this could be back from something that happened to my grandmother, my mother, my father. They don't see the patterns when you're in that cycle. So there's a lot of different nuances behind it. And the reasons I wanted us to kind of start with it, because I hate to say it, I always feel like sometimes generational trauma is one of those sexy buzzwords that everybody likes to throw out at people when they're talking about pain. Like you hear everyone says generational trauma, or you even heard it from the church, breaking generational curses. That's pretty much what they like to stem it as. But I always feel like before you can actually heal something, you have to look at how it's defined and think about how it's defined for you, because everybody's experience is going to be totally different. So I love hearing your perspectives about that. So do we feel like that's pretty much a good working definition of where we are with trauma with that?
I think so. And I think also kind of bridging a few of those definitions that really, I think the lack of resources, a lot of times, as far as that unhealed hurt goes from our parents and our parents' parents and all of that too. I mean, it's a lack of resources that they had and, moving, backward through our family history. So I really do see how those two kind of come together, and certainly in my own life and for others that I know. So I love that definition.
Yeah. And it's funny because that was a great segue, because my question is, now that we've kind of defined it, how has generational trauma, that's my next question, played a role in your relationships with your family, in your friends? Like, how have you identified it in your life, and where do you think you are with it right now? I know it's getting heavy, y'all. It's getting heavy.
I think overall, just not speaking for self, if you don't, like Tita said, if you don't even identify it, you kind of fall into it. But when you begin your healing journey, your healing process, self-reflection, I can say for me, it makes you distance yourself from it. You want to help, but you can't change other people. And those people that are not ready to own it, recognize it, they're going to stay in what they're in. So now the only thing you can control is, do you stay in it with them? Do you change the relationship, or do you just back away? You have to do, once you start growing, you can't put the blinders back on once you see it. So you have to do what helps you. What do you need to do for your own mental health?
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. It's funny that you would say that, because like I told you guys when I first started the episode, I feel like today my generational trauma has been like beating me in the head, just because of interactions that I've had today with family in relation to it. And if I even think about it, I didn't realize until I got older that I was experiencing the ramifications of generational trauma, especially with my family. Or I did not. I just assumed that every family was jacked up. I did. And like, we all have those relatives, just kind of like that, like the proverbial Uncle Roscoe that nobody likes to talk to because his life is messed up. And you just have those people that you kind of keep hidden in secret. So for me, I just assumed it was one of those things where it's just like, well, everybody got somebody that, you just try to keep at bay, keep at distance. And I thought that this was normal. I have to admit, I didn't have the lyrics or the thought to be able to relate it into trauma that they're experiencing until now. I'm probably just at the point in these late 40s that I'm able to give grace. I just assumed or try to distance, but I didn't see that. So I'm just kind of curious, like your perspective. So Yolanda, I agree. I mean, you have to find that grace and decide if you're going to distance it. But it took me a heck of a long time to get to the point where I have decided, well, do I really want to distance it? Or I just got comfortable being comfortable in a cycle of dysfunction. Personally. Anybody else? What about you guys? Like, I'll call on Christina. What about you? What do you think in relation to your family?
For me, it's caused a lot of distance. I still love a lot of people from a distance. I just have boundaries, and I understand I can't help them. Like Yolanda said, I don't try. I used to try to people please. I don't do that anymore. I found out a lot of stuff late, a lot of like history late. I joined Ancestry, Ancestry.com. And so I started calling around to ask things, and it got really weird. And I was like, wait a minute, you mean to tell me this? And then I'm adding up like dates, and I'm like, man, my great grandmother was really young, and I'm like, she had how many kids? And then did this happen? And I'm like, okay, this makes a lot of sense as to why my family unit looks so broken. So many of us don't speak. So many of us don't know each other, don't care to know each other. And it's trickled down through everyone's kids. So it's so distant. We don't have that bond. We don't have that strength that you kind of imagine a family would have. And it kind of sucks, but you have to accept it and meet people where they are.
Totally understand that. Yes. I just told somebody that today I've got to meet him where he is. That's why I was relating to my brother. I was like, I keep trying to save this man, but he has to want to save himself and break that pattern. So totally get that. Mm-mm. What about you, Valerie?
Yeah, I can definitely say for me, it's as I've gotten older, I've certainly recognized it a lot more, how it's affected me in my, especially romantic relationships, but really in every area of my life. My family, we're a very close knit family. I do love my family, but there's also a level of enmeshment, and I wasn't aware of that until I got older. That even in my 30s, realizing that when I do something that I don't think that they're going to approve of or whatever, I assume that I'm going to get in trouble. It's like I've been living on my own for 8 years with completely on my own, independent, whatever. And I still oftentimes have trouble trusting, I think, that instinct of mine and trusting that I can do the right thing and that what is right for me, I'm going to figure out for myself. And then similarly, I've seen it affect, attachment styles and the relationships that I've been in. They haven't always been the most secure, and recognizing too that I always thought that I was like a carbon copy of my mom in a lot of ways, because we have similar sense of humor and similar ways of interacting with people. But as I've gotten older, really recognizing some of the things in my father that are unhealed, that are things that I experience as well, with the way I move in the world. And as I've gotten older, I've kind of realized how much is unhealed in both of them. And within the family unit as a whole and what I grew up with. And while again, we're close knit, everybody is kind of looking out for the best interest of one another. We're very fortunate in that respect. At the same time, there's, that enmeshment and the level of investment sometimes isn't healthy. And it definitely has had some negative impacts for me, kind of moving into the world as I've gotten older.
Yeah, I can understand that, because I told on the first episode, like, I have a very small, like, little family. Like, it was just my mom, my dad, my sister, me. I have a brother, but we weren't raised together. And so that little core, it always will go back to the core. And I think that created even more trauma for my brother, in relation to that, because he was a part of the core, but he couldn't penetrate the core. Wasn't there all the time. And I think that created resentments, even though those circumstances were determined before I was even a thought in my mother and father's eye. It was just, I think for him, it has created this cycle within him where he cannot fully love himself, because he just feels abandoned, I still think, from the trauma of the decision that he couldn't be raised with us. And it wasn't my mother's decision. It was my grandfather's decision. My grandfather refused to let him go to live with my mom and my dad when they first got married. And they needed him there, and my mother acquiesced to that. And I think he carries that type of trauma. So I totally can understand what you're saying. It's the enmeshment. It's like those grips that can really hold you back and limit you, and they just keep going all the time. So I totally can see that. What about you, Tita? How has that impacted you and your family?
Well, fortunately, I don't feel the pain as much, because I've healed through a lot of my trauma within the last 3 years or so. And I would say this: as a young child, I was sparky then, right? And and as you know, I can feel authenticity, if someone's authentic or not, because that's just my soul. So I even as a young child, I things just seemed foreign, like the way family members interacted, the way they spoke to each other, the way they behaved, it just always seemed kind of odd to me. And I was always the one that would end up crying, because I was very, very sensitive, because it just didn't make sense that you would treat people the way you treat people, even at a young age.
Nice.
But, as you go through it, as you get older, then unfortunately you do start to put those walls up, and you do start to maybe adopt some of those behaviors. And so I didn't realize really family trauma until 2019. I had got married, and my therapist even said that marriage is one of the significant things in your life where if you have some unresolved trauma, it's going to come up. And let me tell you, it came up. It came up to a point to where I had to get divorced. So the marriage only lasted 2.5 years, which is great. I mean, it's okay, because I healed a lot, and I realized the trauma that I took on, that when I was able to look back at family dynamics, is immense judgment and criticizing. So I was criticized a lot, and I was judged a lot. And then I was presenting that behavior in my relationship. So like I said, I went through a lot of healing. And, now with my family, it's interesting because nobody's really, maybe there's one relative that I know who's like me, who pretty much kind of worked through some things, but behaviors are the same. But you know what? It doesn't impact me because I understand and know where it's coming from. So I know it's not me. As before, I didn't have that understanding. So I know it's not me at all. So I don't, I can love them from a distance, like Christina said. But even if I do have conversations with them, I know how to have the boundaries. I know how to be like, I'm good. Okay. I'm going to talk to you later, but I don't get caught up in their stuff because I know it's their stuff and I know it's not my fault. So it doesn't impact me at all like it used to in the past.
And I think that's powerful. Like I said, I aspire to get to that in certain levels because, like, my family is like my Achilles heel. Because even though the relationships are strained at times, it is still in me. And I even think sometimes that could be because of generational trauma, that I still seek to build that bridge with them, because I want them to know that I love them. Like, I definitely think that with my brother. Like, I want him to know that, yes, we weren't raised together, but that doesn't mean that I don't love you. In spite of how you act, I still love you. Do I like you? Absolutely not. But do I love you? Yes. And I'm still in believing for you. I told someone today, I still have faith of a mustard seed, that you will change your life for the better. Not for me, not for anybody else to actually say that to see, I want you to win. I genuinely want you to win because I feel like you're so low that you need somebody to make you, to believe in you. And I think sometimes we have to understand that that is still possible without it impacting our life, without it just ruining our day, because it can. Carrying these people's weights and traumas can definitely ruin your day. And I admire how you ladies are putting those boundaries in place, and I aspire to that more and more. But the question that I would ask you as you are getting to that, because I'm curious, like, we came up with this concept, full transparency, because I was one day in my house with my mom, and my mom was sitting in her room on the edge of the bed, and she said, "Pam, I want to tell you something." And I was like, "Okay, what do you want to tell me, Mom?" "Girl, I come from a dysfunctional family." "Really? You didn't know that?" "I knew that, girl. I knew that like about 10, 12 years ago. You just figured it out." "I just figured it out. I was listening to a show on the radio, and they were talking about how, as older generations, the things that they had seen in their childhood, and like the things that my mother and her family endured. I mean, from, spousal domestic violence, and my grandmother, she was severely burned during their childhood, like burned over 60% of her body and had to be hospitalized. But it's like there's so much. And for her to admit that was not right, and she's just in her 70s, being able to admit that that's not right. So it makes me wonder, like, have you guys had those experiences with these people who are going through the trauma where they finally realize, even now, at whatever age that they are, that, you know what, I've got some issues? And how have you dealt with that? How has that made you look at them or your family on the journey as you are dealing with the trauma? Go ahead, Christina.
Okay, so I'll just give a little bit of background and then jump to the now. So I'll start with my mother. And it all starts with my grandparents on both sides. That's as far as the dysfunction goes that I understand. My mother grew up in foster care. She's the oldest of 9. She went into foster care at the age of 8. And because she's the oldest, she remembers everything. And she had a close attachment to my grandmother. And what happened was my grandfather went off to war. He came back, shell shock, alcoholic, very abusive. I mean, the abuse, she says, one of the worst things she remember, he busted, because my grandmother used to make her sleep in the bed with her. And my mom thinks that's because she was scared. Wow. And he came in drunk, trying to cut off my grandmother's ear, and he almost got it. And my mom was like, she dragged her and they ran out. And so that's one of the traumatic stories she remembers, one of many. And so in a nutshell, my grandmother suffered great mental health issues that triggered it. She lost custody of all the kids. Of course, my grandfather couldn't take them and take care of them. His parents attempted to, but he took them from them. And they said, okay, well, don't come back then. They tried to take care of the kids. And so from there, they were all split up. And it's just as you said, Pam, they have big issues because they didn't grow up together. Everybody's at each other's neck. Like you grew up better, or you don't understand. And y'all left me. Some of them, my mom was separated with the 2 youngest at the time. They were in a foster home together. Some of them weren't. Some of them went to group homes. Some of them, my mom said she ran into one of her brothers playing outside in their neighborhood. Someone came up to her and said, hey, your brother lives with us. And she says, what brother? She says, I didn't even know I had another brother. And, it was that bad. And so even till this day, my mother's 69, and she's trying so hard to still build a relationship with all her siblings, and they still argue about this. Y'all left me. You went with them and y'all had a better home. And when you really dig deep, everybody was severely abused in their foster homes. Wow. Because this was the 50s. And, things weren't really as monitored as they may be today. Some things just easily went under the rug. It was very bad. And, I'm in a stage where I am parenting my parent a lot of times because she's slowly shared some deep trauma surrounding foster care that I never knew. I knew she was in foster care all my life, but I never knew what her life was really like. Right. And she's been just randomly telling me stories. I guess she's gotten more comfortable. And I feel like it's not pity, but it's like understanding as to why her personality is the way she is, and things that I saw as flaws. I don't think she can really help their wounds. And, I'm just being kind to her in ways that she hasn't even been kind to me at times, because now I see why. And I'm like, you're hardened because of this. And when I'm kind to her, she's now telling me more. And even just today, she called me. She needed help with PowerPoint. She doesn't know how to use it. And I'm like, okay, video chat me. And when she teaches me stuff, she berates me bad. How do you not know this? This is so easy. You need to go to school for this. And it's just bad. And I'm like, I've never seen this before. I'm trying to help, And so today I was helping her, and I won't do that to her. In the past, I used to take it as an opportunity to give a gotcha. You do this to me, I'm going to do it to you. But now I don't. I'm like, no. I said, she's all insecure. I don't know how to do this. I said, it's okay. Just read the toolbar. Do this, do that. I'm patient. And I feel like I'm giving her the patience that she didn't even give me, that she doesn't give herself. and it feels like I'm parenting my parent. So I'm just being like patient and gentle with her through some of the things. And it's hard because sometimes you're like, you would never do this for me. Like, you would be so mean to me if I admitted I didn't know how to do these things. But, it's okay. It's fine. And sometimes that slightly changes people. They remember that sometimes.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's what we talked about before. It's empathy. It's empathy and it's understanding. Not saying that absolves all the crazy, but at least it's a fact of understanding where it comes from and being able to identify it and being better than that. To me, that's where you begin breaking these generational traumas, or curses, as people like to say it, when you make the decision to be different in your approach, even when it's hard. Because it's God knows it is. It's tough sometimes. They like to try you and test it out. And you have to be careful what day of the week you catch. You might catch the good side. You might catch the trauma side, but it's tough. Okay, Yolanda, I'm gonna call you because your face. You got a thought behind this.
I was actually just thinking of the question and my family dynamics, and it's they're not ready. No one talks. No one wants to be vulnerable. And I was thinking while everyone was speaking of where does that stem from? I love my grandmother to death. She was a very prideful woman, but you don't take that outside. This is house business. And she was very good at putting on blinders and not seeing what was actually happening. I know you saw it. I know that had to have hurt you, but you'll never show us. And so when I look at her kids, my mother, my aunt who passed last year, they never showed the trauma. They never showed what was bothering them. It's more of, I'm perfect. It must be you. There's nothing wrong with me. It must be you. And when that's your mindset, you're just not going to heal from it, ever. My mom I mentioned it we don't have a relationship. She owns none of her anything. It's, you need counseling. Something's wrong with you. I don't understand why you feel that way. I am perfect. I am this. She's just not ready. And I remember a conversation I had with her years ago. Her and her sister got into a physical altercation, and my grandmother called me so upset. And I'm in North Carolina, they're in New Jersey. And my grandmother calls, I'm running. So I drive up there and I get to my mother's house first. And I'm like, I'm going to get to the bottom of this. Like, there's been years of hostility. What is wrong? And she started talking, and in my mind, I'm like, we're finally going to get a breakthrough. And she says, and not to make it sound so small, but in my mind, I'm thinking, this can't be it. You don't understand. When we were teenagers, when my girlfriends would come over, she would say, your boyfriend's at the door. And that was it. And I'm thinking, that can't be it. Like, it got to be more. That was it. That's all she would talk about. There was never anything like this happened to me, or no experiences that she shared that would make one understand like why things are just like this. Other than the thing in my family is, well, you know how so-and-so is. That's just how they are. So I guess you think it's okay because everyone accepts it.
Yeah. And I think that that's okay too, because if I were to look at it, I have some family members who definitely are not. I'm quite confident. Like, I don't think that they would be upfront and honest to admit that they have been through trauma, because then that's to admit that something is wrong with them and something was wrong with the way that they were raised. And I just don't personally think that a lot of people want to do that sometimes, because they're like, I got through it, I made it. And I hate to say it. I think sometimes, especially in the Black community, that is what we always say: keep things in the house, inside of the house. But then at the same time, hey, it could have been worse. You survived. You didn't die. You made it. You got through it. And we don't realize that, yeah, you got through it, but there is like a lifetime of trauma now that you have pulled through with you, that's not going to just impact you. Probably it's going to impact your children, and it'll impact your children's children if you are not careful and vigilant to start admitting that it wasn't right. It wasn't right. So you have to make some hard behind choices in those situations.
I 100% agree. Like my mom, I'm sorry. My mom, I've been trying to convince her to try therapy, even at her age. I don't care. I'm never going to stop trying to convince her. And she has this stigma around it because of her age. She feels like you got to be crazy. And I said, no. It's like any other doctor, you know, you go to make sure you're healthy everywhere else for your teeth, your heart, your everything. Why not make sure your mind is healthy? And she was like, you know, I can tell she sees herself like I'm successful, which she is very successful. She overcame so much. And I'm like, but she's like, yeah, I'm fine. I made it through this. And I'm like, no, I see a little mental illness. I see so many layers of things wrong on, oh my goodness. And I'm not trying to like put her down and say like, actually, but it is some things wrong. You do need to still go to therapy. And I'm like, for you to even have been in foster care in the ways, I think like anyone that has gone through that system needs therapy.
Yeah.
You should be in therapy. And I don't know what they do today, but I know back then they weren't putting them in therapy. And I'm just like, that alone is probably the source of a lot of the issues happening. And, you know, she just doesn't believe in it. And she feels like, well, I'm a success here, so I overcame all of that. And no.
Yeah. Analysis, it actually is something you still need to work on. And yeah, I need you to acknowledge it. Go ahead, Valerie.
I can totally relate on that one myself. My mother, so my grandmother, just for a little bit of background, came to this country from Germany, and very German mindset, very traditional, stoic. You do things a certain way. But she came over during the Holocaust, lost most of her family, was separated from her parents. They were working in someone's home, and she was living with an aunt and uncle that she didn't know. And she stuffs everything down to this day. And when we've had really stressful things happen in the family, again, kind of pushing it down. And it was something I didn't see in my mother for a long time. And I was a little bit that way too, where my dad's side of the family is like, you have even a little bit of a feeling, and we're very passionate on that side, and sometimes a little bit too much to that extreme. But if someone feels something, you're going to know it. The other side, to like, pardon my language, they would say, my dad always says about that side, they wouldn't say shit if they had a mouthful. And it's, it's unfortunate, but there is a lot of, on, the two different sides and how I grew up with it. And during the pandemic, I've seen, I think because it's brought out so much with so many of us, with just the struggles that we've all gone through. And I personally think that if it were made readily available, I think that every single person on this planet would benefit from the right therapist and with the right techniques. And unfortunately, that access isn't always there. But I have been encouraging my mom, hey, you really need to, talk to someone. And she's encouraged me and my sister when we were going through things, hey, you should go to therapy. So we went, but now that we're kind of telling her the same thing, oh no, I'm not crazy. It's like, first of all, are your children crazy? Is that what you're implying? But aside from that too, that, hey, it's, talking about your feelings isn't necessarily going to, you might get emotional in the moment, but I find if I cry it out half the time, it does release something, and, that we're holding on to. But there is so much holding on, I think, on that side of our family, where people just don't talk and don't say what's on their mind. And then it definitely has affected us in a lot of different ways. But it's so frustrating. And I've had to kind of step back a little bit, and hey, some people just don't want to be helped. But it is very challenging when you see someone you love kind of suffering and not willing to make the changes. So the boundary piece is so important there, but it's hard. It's really hard.
Absolutely. I mean, and again, a senior going into counseling is tough. I could imagine, because it's a lot to unpack. I have talked to my mom about counseling. I did after my father died, and she just was not with it in the slightest. But at the same time, I had to think about it. It's like, you're 63 years old at that point. That's what she was. And I'm like, how do you unpack 63 years of your life in that, and feel confident in telling that person that? Not that you shouldn't do it, but it just made me kind of think a little bit more. Like, again, it kind of goes back to how do you ask that older generation to do something that is just so not their nature, and to be so vulnerable? You know, it's easier, I hate to say it, for us because we live in a cycle and time of that, but for them, how do we do it? And how do we encourage them? How do we keep that space? So it's a lot to think of in that regard. Tita, I know, what about you? Because I know you had a thought too.
Yeah, well, geez. I mean, I moved my mom here a year ago, and that a whole year has gone by where I saw a 185-degree change. In the very beginning, I didn't know we gonna make it. But one of the things I really wanted to make sure it was more of my immediate family that I could at least influence by me healing and mere just different behaviors that shows that maybe I am in some stuff. Extended family, I still pray for them. Let's just put it that way. But I can't be concerned and controlled because in my immediate family, they're still kids. They're still young kids. So for me, it's really important for me to break some cycles in my immediate family. So with my mom being 75, probably the first 6-7 months, I just started having conversations with her. And I know she feels uncomfortable because my aunts, they always had this hard shell. No one showed any vulnerability whatsoever. None. And I'm open book. So none of them showed any vulnerability. And I just kept having conversations. And I just started giving specific examples. Because those specific examples, then she had to kind of take a step back and be like, oh. And then she started processing, and then she started becoming very vulnerable. At first, it was kind of like blaming other situations, other people. And then I had to explain, yes, I know you experienced a lot of trauma because of your very abusive father. They slept with tennis shoes on in bed because he would just go, he would just break out in some rage, and they had to pick cotton, right? And so he would take them out of school to just go pick cotton. And if the siblings argue, he would come out there with a gun and shoot it out there, right? So I knew that she had a lot of trauma. So I had to just share those things and how it was impactful and how it transferred into us. And then she started actually crying. Like, I've never seen her cry in my 74 years, like really crying. So I can tell, I was like, Mom, because she was trying, I said, let it go. Keep going. It's healthy. It's healthy. So I would say for a good 2 months straight, anytime we would talk, just blah, blah. And I was like, let it out. This is good. This is good. Right. And now when she's talking to her sisters and my cousins and their stuff are doing stuff, she, like just today, we were talking about something else and she was like, yeah, trauma's in her family. Yep, I see it. She's like able to understand it, able to acknowledge it, able to see it. And one thing that I would say, because what she was a peacekeeper, because she was I think the strongest of all the siblings. And so everyone would go to her and she was a peacekeeper. But I'm like a peacemaker. A peacekeeper is someone who just wants to keep the peace. Peacemaker is someone who understands you have to have conflict to get to peace. Like sometimes you have to have those hard conversations, right? And so she was able to understand too that, yeah, she just tried to be that nice person all the time, did not have anybody get upset with her in the family. So everyone would talk to her and like her. And I said, that's not anything to be proud of because you're masking everything. Mm-hmm. Right. So yeah. So I'm actually able to say, like, I saw a shift, an immense shift in my mom in 74 years, like drastic shift. Now I have to say this. I do think God definitely played into it because when she was married with my stepfather, he passed away like a few years ago, it wouldn't have transpired. I truly believe that God was like, okay, enough of that. Time for him to go because I need some healing with them, some significant healing. So that significant healing has been able to transpire. And now I'm able to kind of share some things with my brother and make sure the kids and stuff are all getting what they need to.
That's good. I mean, it definitely shows the cycle of it, because you're right. It's having those hard conversations. And I think about Yolanda, like you said, not everybody's able to receive it. And I've had those moments like Tita, like my mother probably would tell everybody, oh, she loves to bring up the past. I do. I'm that child. You did it. I'm going to talk about it because that's just what I do. I feel like, because like I told her, now that you live with us, it's time to right the ship. Not that she wasn't a wonderful mother, but her traumas from never being able to have situations where she was expressed love openly like that, have caused her not to be that parent with us. Like, we're affectionate children, and she was not an affectionate mother. Our father was the beacon of affection. So it's like when he passed away, I was devastated because I was like, that's my rock. That's my ABC, my 1, 2, 3, my all that. Now I'm with mama, and I love mama, but mama's hard. And I can't be going through the rest of my life with mama trying to be old mama. So it was like I had to press on her and pull on her to be the mother that I and my sister needed. And in that is where we were able to get to that level of healing where now she's like, oh, you guys just treat me like a little doll. Yes, we love on you and kiss on you. It's like that Animaniacs where, oh, I love it, squeezy. Yeah, she is literally like a little toy, honey. Now I'm like, if we want to hug you, I sit on your lap, whatever I want to do, you are right. Because I want this time that we have to be exactly what it should be, so we can both be full and empty when things change again. Because I want that, but having to force those conversations. And so I was just curious how you guys have had that. And I understand not everybody's going to be able to rock with it. It's not. So that makes me wonder, knowing that everyone's not going to be able to rock with it, do you feel like, or let me ask it this way, do you feel like it took a significant life event for you to be able to address the generational traumas in your life? Like for me, it was. My father's death was like the catalyst to me being able to get deep about the trauma in our family. So I'm just curious, was that the same for everyone else?
Like I mentioned earlier, it was my divorce.
It was right for you, a divorce.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That was a catalyst too. Woo, a lot.
Yeah, and that's a major life-altering situation. Yolanda, I see you have yours too.
It's the same. It was like God was like, dig deeper. It started with divorce, dig deeper, empty nest, dig deeper. My aunt passing, and she was like a mother figure. Dig deeper, falling out and addressing it with my birth mother. So it was like a series of events that happened that I had no choice but to sit in it and what is going on, think back, own how it has affected me, because there was trauma in me that was passed down. How do I deal with that and come out of it?
Okay, yeah. Christina or Valerie, what about you? Anything major, like life-altering in regards to making you deal with generational trauma in that way? I mean, I know, Valerie, you mentioned the pandemic. But Christina, what about you?
I think another one for me.
Go ahead.
Sorry, my thing kind of cut out for a second. Okay. I think another thing for me personally, probably the romantic relationships have been an eye-opener in the past for how I kind of show up in the world and how I show up around a loved one. And I had gotten out of a relationship in my early 20s that was extremely toxic, verbally abusive, thankfully not physically, although I do believe it would have gotten to that point had we stayed together a little bit longer. And getting out of that situation and realizing that some of the things that I justified were behaviors and things that were said in our own household or things that I saw growing up, a little bit farther externally into the family, but things that I justified that really, we talked about, I think you were saying earlier about how these things aren't necessarily normal, but they're very common. It's not normal and it shouldn't happen, but we see it. So we think that it's normal. And getting out of that one relationship in my early 20s, that was it really changed who I was as a person for a long time in a bad way almost. For a long time, I was very angry and very just hostile toward the people I loved. And I had to go through a lot of therapy and a lot of soul searching. And through that process, as I have come out the other end a lot better for it, I have recognized, these are behaviors that I saw growing up that caused me to believe that this was okay. And these are things that were said that I internalized over the years, and just things that I saw that really weren't okay. And then I think with the peacemaker and the peacekeepers, I was always the peacekeeper in the family as well. There was a lot of volatility between my sister and my dad. They're very, very similar personalities. And thankfully, they have also come out the other side much better in the long run. But growing up, it was very challenging being, these two people butting heads to such a scary sometimes degree. And seeing that and kind of having to be the third parent sometimes, and the best friend sibling, and that peacemaker, the one that kind of got everybody to talk. I ended up also then growing up accepting a lot of things and taking on a lot of the conflict, and being highly sensitive as well. I internalize it and I can handle it in the moment. I am a great, conflict resolution person, but I get home and I'm like, okay, I'm figuring out those cleansing practices now to kind of cleanse my energy from some of it. But it really was something that affected me for a long time. And so I do think, that's really where I've seen it show up. And that one relationship in particular was probably the most, the one that affected me the most, that really caused me to see how much those things in my life growing up and really my early teens and, middle school age, how that shaped, and the things that my parents dealt with too, how all of that shaped what we're, what the decisions we made later on.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that. And it's funny. I'm going to pivot because the way that you said that, I have another question, because I have never been in an abusive relationship, but I will say one thing, and my mother says it to me sometimes too. She feels like maybe she and my father raised us too strong. And she said that could be why you've been single for so long. And the reason that she says that is because, like, my mom made that decision, obviously seeing my grandmother being physically abused. She was like, I never want my daughters to be in a position where a man would physically hurt them. And so they always tried to raise us to be very strong, very opinionated. And the same with my father. My father grew up with his mother. He didn't grow up with his father. And his mother was younger. Younger woman. She passed away when she was, I think, 44. And so he watched her struggle. And I didn't know this until actually right before he passed away, that she was the other woman. That was like the big thing back then. Like, you had husbands had whole separate families on top of the family. So he had this whole separate family with my grandmother. He had 2 children with her. And like my father did not have a relationship with growing up. He met him at her funeral. And when he met him, he gave him $5. That was the first thing that he did to him. And my father said that always carried with him, because he wanted to make sure, watching his mother struggle, watching her get judged by her family, he never wanted his daughters. He always used to tell me, I never want you to be beholden to a man. I want you to be able to make it. I don't ever want you to have to worry about, devaluing you so that you have to make it through. So I wonder, for you all, do you feel like your generational traumas have impacted your relationships. I don't necessarily believe that is what has kept me single, but I don't know. And it could be, I don't really care because I'm going to be strong and be me and be good with it. And the right person will come along and be all right. But I'm just curious, how has your generational traumas impacted your relationships? I mean, Tita, obviously yours led to a divorce, but for Yolanda and Christina, did you see that manifest in your romantic lives?
I definitely did. I don't even know where to start. Well, first, because I didn't feel like I had the correct bond with my mother, I leaned too hard into relationships. I'll say that. I valued dating and men too much. I was that person that couldn't be single. I went from relationship to relationship to relationship. One of my cousins made a joke because they couldn't keep up. And they were like, what do you make these guys sign contracts? And I was like, basically, like, that was the joke. I was like, you're gonna make fun of me, I'll go with it. But that was something I realized was an issue with me. And I kind of had really low standards in my relationships. I remember in 2019, I had a new therapist, and one of her first questions was like, eventually she asked, have you been in an abusive relationship? And I said, I don't think so, maybe one, but it was an unsure answer, like I couldn't identify it. And she says, well, do you know why you can't identify it? And I said, no. And so after telling her a bit about my childhood, she said, basically, well, no, let me back it up a little bit. I told her I didn't realize it was possibly abusive until other people approached me to pull me to the side and say, are you okay? And because they acknowledged it was when I admitted, oh, this might be an issue, in this relationship. And she says, do you know why you couldn't recognize it until other people recognized it? And I said, well, no. And she says, as a child, your feelings weren't validated unless the adults told you they were validated. If they told you how you felt, that's how you felt. You didn't have a voice. And so she said, in your relationships, that's how you identified, like, you have issues, or if someone else sees it, then it must be real. And I said, oh my goodness, like, I think that is what happened. I did change the way I viewed that relationship, even though I kind of knew. Yeah. I had one of my best friends at the time kept telling me and warning me, and I was like, oh, psh. But when I had a professor pull me to the side, because we had a class with the guy I was dating, and he was a little aggressive to her. It was just bad. And she was like, are you okay? Like, do you need help? And I was like really embarrassed. And other people, I was like, okay, yeah, this might be a little bit of an issue. So it showed up in and that was when I was about 18. Yeah. So it showed up early. I'll say with my husband now, when we started dating, this is a very healthy relationship, the healthiest I've ever been in. And he comes from a different culture, and he comes from he has his trauma too, but he comes from a much healthier family dynamic. And so he's been looking at things, and he's been validating me and kind of showing me how to love, in a sense, because I've always been the stronger one in the relationships that have to teach the guys, and the bossy one. And in this relationship, I do feel a little smaller in that sense, because he's taught me so much. He's kind of changed how I love for the better. And he just kind of validates the ways that he sees my mom be towards me, or he sees people, how they treat me sometimes. And he's like, I don't know about that one, or you're right. You don't have to prove yourself to this person, or, and I'm like, well, thank you. Like, no one is ever on my side. I just feel like I don't ever have support here. So it's been good for that. And I just, I don't know. It showed up in many ways in my relationships, though.
Yeah. And I'm glad you found someone who can validate you, because I can understand having someone who can help you see what love, real healthy love, can be, which is beautiful. What about you, Yolanda?
Definitely, it has shown its way into relationships, whether it's friendships, intimate relationships. I spent pretty much all my childhood, 5 and above, trying to get my mother to love me. So I would do any and everything. And I found as I got older, I was the let me fix it person. If you had a need, let me fix it. And that somehow ended up in a relationship. And then that doesn't work. And what I realized through the healing process is there are certain traits you have when you are the daughter of someone with narcissistic personality disorder. There's 5 traits, and I had every single one of them. So one of the things was, I got to a point where I went from trying to please everyone to at the first sign of anything, I'm out. Like, I'm running. I am not staying. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to work it out. This is just another sign of what I've already experienced. I'm gone. And I think after the healing, I realized it's fear. Yeah. Fear that I give myself to someone and I get treated as I did as a child. Fear that I give myself. It was a question of, I'm 46 years old. I've never actually fallen in love. I made strategic decisions to be with you. I eventually loved you, but I've never allowed myself that vulnerability to actually fall in love. And it was always the question of, I would always say this, if my birth mother couldn't love me, how can you?
Ooh.
And so that was a hard thing to get past and get through. I think I'm in a better place now.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to test the waters a little bit and see. But coming out of it, I had to let a lot of friendships go because I was the doer. I was there because you needed, not because you were a good friend. Had to let that go. And meeting people, it was, instead of me constantly looking for the red flag, just let it go and see what happens. I'm working on that. I'm still a work in process when it comes to that, but I'm working on it.
Yes, I totally feel that. It's funny. Tita and I had a conversation, what was it, yesterday, Tita, about red flags and stuff like that and trauma. And she helped me identify trauma in myself in regards to my fears and being upfront. So I felt you when you say that, because I that's to me, my biggest stumbling block is my fear of being vulnerable and letting that love be in and asking the questions, because I am a strong little independent little soul. But, it's like the fear of getting the truth. and luckily she helped right set me, and I'm going to continue to work through that. But I agree with you. It is no joke. I mean, I know, Tita, you went through the divorce and you said that was like a major catalyst for you with it. Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah, it was a major catalyst with the trauma, but just like Yolanda was saying, and Christina, and even Valerie mentioned, I think women who have trauma, I think it's going to manifest in relationship with men anyway. But over time, I always kind of heard little something from men, but I just kind of like, whatever. It didn't work. But it was always like I was unemotionally available, right? And that was the catalyst for me and the relationship, actually hearing, my marriage, my ex saying that, and just other ways that I had behaved. I had to finally kind of take a step back and be like, well, damn, I am a common denominator in a lot of this stuff. Like how we're saying before, oh, that was your fault. That's your doing. I get it. Like some of the men that I attracted had a lot of trauma, because I think if you're a 2, you're going to attract a 2, because a 10 ain't going to be with you, because a 10 will know, no, this girl's a 2. I ain't trying. Right. So I think you attract kind of what you are. I mean, to some degree. And, but I realized all those relationships that weren't working with men was because I thought, honestly, that it was my biological father, not having that relationship with him, in and out. And then unfortunately, my stepdad was very, very verbal abusive. And then, I grew up in Edmonds, being the only Black person. So I had that dynamic too. So I had all the indicators. You know how you could take those the tests to see how much trauma you had. You're like, girl, all mine, check. But it was actually my mother was the whole crux of a lot of my relationship challenges. And I just assumed that I didn't connect well with men because it was the men in my life, but I realized it was more of my mother. So that was huge once I really kind of learned that. But y'all know I got divorced at 19, and no, I haven't been in a relationship since. And I think part of it is, I can admit, a part of it is a little bit of fear because I am a lot healthier. I know what I want. I know what will work for me. I wouldn't have to go in having a mask. I wouldn't have to go in manipulating, but I keep saying, I told Pam next year, but I think I said next year a year ago too. So, but anyways, I'm gonna get there. And that's unique for me because part of that trauma is I would continuously get into relationships, right? Because it made you feel like we're all saying validated, or it made you feel a certain way. And so I've drastically healed because I don't have that desire that I feel like I need to be in one. Yes, I want to have that, be married again and have that life partner and build and do great things. Yeah, I'm a little hesitant just because I'm so healthy. But I know God's going to work it out and make it away. I know he's out there saying, I'm healthy. I'm looking for that healthy woman too. So we'll come together. But yeah, I don't even know what to do with the first conflict.
My divorce was final in 2019 also. And I have been one toe in, one toe out, one toe in. I just, in the last month, have decided to put both feet in. Everything else is still leaning out, but both feet are in. And it feels different being healed.
Yeah.
So I'm going to say I'm overly cautious. I'm just aware. I'm not only aware of you, I'm aware of me. How does this make me feel? Is this right? Is this what I want? So I'm asking all the questions before just completely going in.
So you've had dates. I haven't even had one, girl. I need one. I'm going to just hire somebody. I'm going to hire a matchmaker who can do all that background and be like, what type of he is therapy. He's had therapy already, right? Okay, great. Because everyone has some sort of trauma. I don't care where you come from. $1 million, $0. You got something. So, okay. I know I'm going off track.
No,
but I'm just saying.
And it's funny because, like I said, we just had that conversation because I'm trying to like dip a foot in, dip my whole soul in. And like, I initially started off the conversation with Tita, like, I think I might take a lover or I might try to date somebody. I don't know. But it's like one of those things. And because I feel you, it's like you work so hard to get to this point mentally where you feel good, where the traumas are just not beating you down, where you can identify that things are crazy. And it's like, do I really want to go back out here and invite somebody else who might not be healed into my life? Because for me now, it's all about you have to add value. If you're not going to make my life, if you're not going to add value to me at this point, I'm good on being single because I just rather be alone than have somebody who doesn't add value. But I think my picker is getting a lot more selective because you're always going to meet somebody who has trauma. No one is perfect. And I would never expect that. For me, it's just about being with someone who's able to identify that they have trauma and is willing to do some work on that trauma. Because generational trauma is impacting all of us in some form or fashion, whether we like it or not. And it's being with people who are open to being able to admit it. I mean, I had like so many other questions to ask. We didn't even get to the grief side of this, so I have to figure out how we will do it. But I do have a question because I see like all of you are in this phase where it's like you're embracing the healing. You've done the work, you've embracing the healing. And I think, one, I commend everybody for even acknowledging the fact that you have generational trauma, because there's tons of people out here who still act like it's not happening and no, it's not, or they're afraid to face it because fear is real, to unpack your pain. But then now that you've unpacked it and you've kind of walked through it, what is one thing that you guys would recommend to someone to begin the journey? Because to me, that's the key. You have to be open to beginning it. Because I think once you get into it, then you realize how good it feels to get rid of it. But you got to be willing to even take that step. So what is one thing that you would tell someone to even start the journey to heal like that?
I would say start with self. Like, it's easy to point out how someone else has affected you, but when you're really ready to heal, start with self. Therapy, journaling. Sometimes it's talking to other people who have experienced similar trauma or just similar experiences. But just be honest with yourself and be open. And know that it's hard, but on the other side of it, it's so light. Like, you're not carrying all of the weight that you did going into this. You're not worried about what this person thinks. You're more confident in yourself. You're not carrying, this person was this way and it's my fault. All of that, you realize, you've done the work, you realize on the other side of it how free life can be. You don't always have to be in survivor's mode.
Okay. Valerie, what about you?
I think a couple of things kind of stand true for me. One would be, if it resonates with you, if you hear about some kind of healing modality you've never heard of and you're like, hey, it sounds like it could work or sounds interesting, try it. Because I feel like sometimes these things are coming to us because we're meant to hear it. And so I've always been kind of a guinea pig with that. I found therapy to be very beneficial, but for some of the more traumatic things that have been so deeply ingrained, learning more about how trauma ingrains itself trauma stores itself in the body, doing EMDR therapy specifically, and some of the more, some of the types of therapy, really like moving energy through, has been very, very powerful to just remove some of the blocks where maybe mentally on my own, I just, for some whatever reason, just couldn't do it. I just kept getting stuck. So if it sounds like it could be worth trying and it's within your value system and it's something that you can do, try it. That's one of my big ones. And then the other thing too is, and this is something it comes to mind even just as we're talking today, is that, everybody does experience trauma. And at the same time, when you're going through it and you're having that difficult time, you can feel so alone in it. It's so isolating. We don't want to talk about it. Everything is highlight reel. And I think we talked about that on the episode of the series that we did a few weeks ago. Yeah. But we're also focused on the highlight reel, but other people, when we're vulnerable with our friends and kind of reach out and connect, because I'm an introvert. So a lot of times I don't even think to reach out to my people. And when I do, I think, why did I not do this weeks ago? I feel validated for the first time in a long time. I feel seen. I feel that, I feel like I'm not alone. And just the number of people that have gone through what you've gone through, I am amazed, because I'm going through a very specific trauma right now that I shared with some friends recently that I was nervous to talk about. And when I did, one of my friends turned out had gone through almost an identical situation, so specific, but still almost identical. And so I think just reaching out and knowing that you're not alone, I think that can be so powerful in itself. You still have to do the work and you can't depend on anybody else for it. But I think having that system and having those people that you can be vulnerable with, and if you don't have them, then I think putting some time into trying to find that community and create that community, that has been, I think, more powerful for me than anything lately.
Oh, that's really cool. Yeah. I'm glad that you have a good support base around you, because a lot of times we hide our traumas because we're ashamed. And so it's really, and it's so funny that, your friend was able to relate to you like that. So that's really cool that you have that. What about you, Christina?
I've had a little bit of a harder time finding a community. So I lean really hard into social media and YouTube University. Of course, therapy at one point was helpful. As I mentioned in the previous episode, she wasn't a good match, and I just haven't found another one. But I did, in the meantime, I started following, if I do lean on people, I do try to lean on people who are medical professionals in this field of work. Yeah. So what is it? Therapy for Black Girls. This podcast. Well, it's healthy, it's soothing, it's healthy, but I do try to lean on, I think, what's her name? She's great on YouTube. Dr. Ramani, she's big on narcissism. She's a doctor. Oh man, I've learned and identified so many things about myself and my mother through her. And part of that was even learning that you can pick up narcissistic traits yourself from your parents. Doesn't mean you're a narcissist, but you have traits. And that's, I think, what showed up in some of my early relationships with myself. But comment sections are like support group. People come in there and they vent, and I just get lost in hundreds of comments of people, sharing their story, talking about their similar issues to mine. And it's soothing, and it helps me identify that I'm not alone and that this is a very common thing. Of course, books. I don't read as much as I would like to. I have a bigger collection than I've actually read. That's my support system. It's just like I buy these books for support and I don't even get to read them all. But self-help books, books on like the 4 agreements and things like that, on communication and understanding.
Yeah.
I've kind of just had to build my own little world. And I do spend a lot of time on social media, like I said. So I just follow a lot of pages that uplift and help to push you along a healing journey and let you know you're not alone.
I like that, because I know social media is like the gift and the curse, and I think it's important that you cultivate your feed for healing. So I think that that's great that you've been able to do that for yourself. I really do. What about you, Tita?
So the question was what to help people identify, maybe?
Yeah, like what have you used that's helped you on your healing journey? Like, what would be one thing that you would recommend to someone who's trying to get started, on their journey of healing their traumas?
Well, I have some recommendations how to get started, but it wasn't how it started with me. So I'll just put out recommendation right now is that I've learned as I've gone through this is what you can understand your trauma by triggers. Like, if something's triggering you over and you're just getting so upset over and over on something like someone said or what someone did, there's probably some sort of trauma that stems from it. I know, I get it that people can be unkind, right? Be just disrespectful. But like, if you're just in a normal conversation, and something said or a certain movement or certain behavior, you notice you're just getting very irate, there's probably some trauma behind it. So try to understand like what that trigger is. And then the second one is like, what beliefs that do you have that are taking you away from your goal? So like, if you have a goal in your mind, you're like, I have this goal, but you can't get towards that goal. You're not making any traction towards that goal. Try to figure out why that is. And a lot of times it's some sort of trauma or something that has been imparted in you to believe, even though in your amygdala, but outside your amygdala and your prefrontal cortex, there's something that you want more, but your amygdala, which is feelings and emotions of something happening that's not even really happening, is stopping you from going to that goal. So there's probably some trauma there. And the third thing I would say is, what are you blaming others for that you can't control? What do you keep blaming people for that you can't control? There's probably some traumas behind that. As far as me, I was a cool beta tester for God. And he just basically had his way with me, stripped everything took everything. So I could not be focused on nothing but on him and on my needs. And I wrote and I wrote and I wrote. I read and I read and I read. And I'm really excited that I will be launching a platform ministry type thing that's going to help others with their trauma, because I truly believe that transparency saves lives. And I'm just excited that what he's downloaded, that I'm using my pain for a purpose, and that I actually went through what I went through, because I'm excited for more people to become free. You know, I've said this before: hurt people, free people, free people. I am free, and I'm ready to free some souls.
Free them, baby. Free them, free them, free them. Snaps up to you with that. I love it. And
I have one more thing to add. I'm sorry.
Please add it.
I haven't done this often, but I have run across these gentle parenting pages. And I don't know if you know what gentle parenting is, but it's like, you know, no spank, and you talk softly and you talk through the issues with your toddlers and your kids. And someone mentioned, and they were like, gentle parent yourself. So your inner child. And so when I see these videos of these platforms on social media, a lot of them have skits. So they have a whole dialogue that they had with their kids, or they'll pretend to be a toddler having a tantrum. And when they break it down as to why this kid is seeing the world the way it is and having a meltdown, you realize we're not too far from that as adults either. And it's interesting. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like, of course, my parents didn't gentle parent at all. And I have been using that on myself a little bit here. And it's been just helping me see and kind of heal myself a little bit, my inner child that never got those things. It's healing to hear someone else and see someone else do that with their children.
I love that too. And it's funny because, inner child work is like a big part. I know for me, in regards to my healing journey, it has been, I did a lot of inner child work with Alexandra L. She has a platform on Instagram and social media. She's written several books on healing. And so I've taken a couple of her intensives where you do inner child work in regards to like writing letters to your inner child, talking about traumas and trying to deal with those. And those are very helpful to me. They're super affordable. So I love to tell people about it. I think the course I took I think it was like either a year ago. It might have been like $50, $60, but I love that it's a great platform. She has a really hands-on approach, and it feels gentle. It kind of goes along with the gentle parenting, like you said, Christina, and being able to talk to yourself, talk to your child in the way that we would have wanted to be, because that is part of your trauma healing. So I love that. And I love the fact that all of you guys have such diverse ways of dealing with it, because not everybody's going to go to counseling. Not everyone is going to journal. Some YouTube University is a popular source. I'm a big fan of YouTube University. I mean, you can fix your car. You can do everything with YouTube. So you might as well get a little counseling if it's going to help your soul be better. And then at the same time, like Tita was mentioning, Valerie, it is about freeing yourself from the trauma and making the choice to free yourself and to heal from it. Because I think, again, a lot of people don't even take the first step because you're so afraid of just beginning to unpack it. But use your tribe, talk to your circle. I struggle with that. I do tend to be at times a tad emotionally unavailable, as I have learned through my conversations with Tita randomly. But I'm trying to get better at healing that side of myself, where I talk about the things that I struggle with so that people can support me. Use your resources, talk to people, trust that people will be available for you. And if they're not, that's a deeper conversation. You might need to make sure your circle's a little tighter, because you might not be around the right people if you can't share your most vulnerable sides with them. So I really appreciate, ladies. We didn't really even get into the full crust of this. So we're going to have to talk again about how this is going to go. But I want to thank you guys for tonight and for coming on and sharing this conversation, because I think it was very impactful. I think it's a beginning. Again, I hate to say it, it's not just a one episode kind of conversation, y'all. So we might have to revisit this again with a little bit more depth because we have to talk about grief a little bit deeper in reference to it and healing from that. But again, I want to thank you, Christina and Tita and Valerie and Yolanda, for your time and your wonderful energy. And we will all be back again soon with another episode. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll talk later. Bye.